And Alfie would celebrate his 16th birthday on Sunday, the 14th of April.
Right, okay.
On that morning, the goldsmiths gave him a pair of trousers that signified that he was now becoming a man.
And why trousers? Like, was he only allowed to wear shorts up until this point?
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah. So, of course, that evening when the Titanic was sinking, Alfred refused his spot on a lifeboat, saying that he was now a man and that he should stay with the men, effectively sealing his fate.
Wow, that's a 16-year-old. I mean, you're still a child at that point. I'm sure they would have been like, no, come on, you can get on this boat. Jeez.
They did.
And he said
and
no.
He refused because he was like, I'm a man now, I'm going to stay behind.
Wow.
Welcome to the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I am Kyle Reese, your ringmaster for this week's episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, your girlfriend who's clinging onto the door and won't let you on for this week.
God, you brought this up in the episode that we're about to do as well at the end, and I told you we're not going to do it.
What?
You will not let this go.
I mean...
I think it was proven that Rose and Jack could have fitted on there.
Exactly.
But I didn't want to get into the debate, though.
To be honest, let's screw this episode. Let's talk about this right now.
Okay, what do you want to say about it?
That he could have fit on it.
Can we move on? Freaks, it's summertime, and of course the Compendium is taking a break, a little short hiatus to recharge our batteries, but please do not worry, we wouldn't possibly leave you guys hanging without your weekly fix. While we're away, we've handpicked a few of our best episodes from season 2 to keep you guys company. And today, we're kicking things off with one of our most requested episodes of all time. Even after this episode aired, people would still write in and ask us to cover this show. And we're like, bitch, we've done one.
In fact, we did two.
Yeah, it's episode 67 from July 2024. And this week, I'm calling it an assembly of icebergs, elegance, and epic misfortunes. This is part 1 of the Titanic. The people, the passions, the legend. And honestly, this is one of my absolute favorites. The story of the Titanic is just so enduring. It's just got everything. I don't think I ever asked, what is your relationship with the Titanic? Do you like the story?
What's my relationship with?
Yeah, because every time it pops up on Netflix or wherever, I'm like, should we watch Titanic? And you're like, God, no.
I cannot watch the movie.
Why?
Sorry. I appreciate it's a good movie. It's James Cameron.
It's because you're not a 12-year-old girl.
It's partly that, but also I find it really sad. I just don't want to go through that.
You don't want to cry again.
No.
Kyle, I just don't want to cry again.
It's the couple on the bed that I just don't want to watch that.
Yeah. Yes, that's it.
But I appreciate it for what it is. I've seen it once or twice.
But the thing is, though, apart from the sadness of it, there's so many other elements to it as well. You've got the incredible showcase of human ingenuity. You've got kind of the spirit of human progress. You've got the desire to push technology to its limits.
Kate Winslet's breasts.
Kate Winslet's boobies. Yeah. Winslets.
What?
Winslet's boobs. And of course, you've also got that stark contrast between the wealth and the poverty, and of course that fatal dose of human hubris, that complete disregard for the power of Mother Nature. What is there not to love? You don't have to just dwell on the sadness, Adam.
There's other
We're
things.
watching it later. What do you remember about this particular episode, though?
Well, I remember the fact that the Titanic was built. It was supposed to be like this magical ship for the elite, those going to America, starting a new life.
Yeah, it was an immigration ship, wasn't
Immigration ship,
Mm.
that it was unsinkable.
it? Mm-hmm.
And the arrogance of people thinking that and
Yeah,
didn't have
the
enough
hubris.
lifeboats.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hang on. This might be one of the questions. Am I right in thinking there was like only one potato peeler on board?
Oh, okay. We'll see what the questions say.
See, I do listen.
Fine, let's put this to the test, shall we? So, Adam, let's play a game of Who Wants to Be a Certified Freak Titanic Edition. Adam, the categories are everybody should know this, the deep diver, and the expert. If you get all three correct, you win yourself a Compendium keychain, which you did not snag for the second time last week.
I know, on my own episode.
I know.
I was close.
This is your opportunity to redeem yourself. And if you win again, like I said last week, you two will be dangling lovingly near your own crotch.
I'll be dangling near my own crotch?
Yeah. Yeah, why you look so happy?
That's confusion. But yes, I will have my keychain by my crotch.
Now, for context, this was a rare two-part episode where we didn't just recount the sinking. We actually started at the very beginning on how the Titanic was conceived and how it was built, how it was stocked for its maiden voyage, and what life was like on board for the people who sailed in it.
Is conceived the right word?
Yeah, conceived, then built, and yeah, conceived.
Like the idea is
No
conceived.
one was having sex with.
Well, I just wondered if there's two giant, when two boats love each other.
Very, very much. So in this part, we explored the creation of the Titanic and introduced you to some of its passengers. In part 2, we covered the actual sinking of the ship and the legacy that left behind. So after listening to today's rerun, feel free to hop over to part 2 and complete the entire story. But for now...
Spoiler alert.
What, that it's sunk.
Yeah.
But for now, we're testing your memory on part 1. So Adam, let's play. Adam, can you tell me how many passengers were on board the Titanic
Oh, God.
when it sunk?
Oh, like what? Were on the ship and they went down with the ship?
Hang on. Oh, what the hell did you think I meant?
Well, I'm just being like, how many were on board before it sunk?
The same number of people that were on board when it sunk. What are you talking about?
No, well, like when it hit the iceberg. But you're talking about people that went down with the ship.
How many passengers were on board?
900, 1,000, 100, 1,100. Yeah, I'm going to go with 1,100. Can we round up and down?
Sure. I'll give you within 100.
Okay, 1,100.
Is that your final answer?
Yes. Oh.
No, Adam. It was 2,224 passengers and crew on board. And you know, only half of them survived. In fact, out of the 908 crew, just 212 made it out alive. So that's a staggering loss of life.
212. Yeah, geez.
Out of the crew, the
Out of the crew.
908. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? Honestly, if I were on board, there would be no question. I'd be elbowing my way to safety if I was a crew member. I'd be like, fuck this, I'm not dying.
You'd put on a dress and be like, I'm Madam Reese.
I'm a lady, don't you know? Yes, so sad first question, but are you ready for question 2?
Yes.
If you get this one correct,
Well, I'm still not getting the keychain, am I, this week?
No, I guess not.
But I'm just playing for fun.
You're just playing for honor now. If you get this one correct, well, you win the title of Deep Diver, all right? And it's quite apt for this episode. Adam, can you tell me, how many lifeboats did the Titanic carry on her maiden voyage?
Not enough. 12? Shouldn't there have been like double the amount, but they only had half the amount? Or maybe it was less than that. I'll go 12.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
No.
24.
Ooh, close. It was 20 lifeboats.
Okay.
And you already locked in the other answer for your final answer, so you can't say 24
I
and
still
claim it as a victory.
I still stand by my first answer.
No, so it was 20. And that's all that was installed. And of course, that was not nearly enough for the total number of passengers on board.
That's what I said, not enough.
But what is wild, the Titanic actually had more lifeboats than maritime regulations required at the time. In fact, they originally considered adding 48 lifeboats, potentially 64 lifeboats. But in the end, they settled on just 20 because they did not want to clutter the deck and ruin the views for the first class passengers. So yeah, they just ended up sticking 20 on board, which was still more than was required. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, but if they had 60, would everyone have been all right?
It's a good question. I probably...
Oh, at least more people would have been all right.
I think so, yeah. Right. Final round. If you answer this correctly, you'll win the accolade of the expert.
Potato peeler.
Adam, can you tell me How many potato peelers were on board the Titanic?
1.
Is that your final answer?
Yes. Yeah.
Well
Okay, so out of
done.
everything, that's the one thing I remembered.
Yeah, apparently it was Bruce Ismay who insisted on just one potato peeler. But how about this? If you get this correct, I will give you the point that you lost. How many tons of potatoes do you think that they had on board?
8? I don't know. I feel like whose job is potato? That must be their full-time job if they've only got one peeler.
One fucking potato peeler.
Yeah.
No, Adam, it was 40 tons of potatoes.
40 tons
That
of potatoes.
poor scullery maid.
God, her thumbs are going to hurt.
That's literally a full-time job.
Mm.
Adam, nice work. You got 2 out of 3.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
No, I only got 1.
You got 1 out of 3.
I mean, no, I didn't. I got 2.
Thanks for playing. So freaks, we hope you enjoyed this rerun episode. It certainly is one of my favorites. And honestly, people just cannot get enough of the Titanic. It's a story of opulence and disaster, but more than anything, it is a story about the limits of human pride. So even if you've heard this episode before, why not give it another voyage? This is our original episode 67, Titanic Part 1. The people, the passions, the legend. We hope you enjoy it. In today's compendium, we are diving into an assembly of oceanic opulence and untold tales.
Ooh, this feel like I might know this one.
What do you reckon, Adam?
There's no more opulence on the ocean than surely a giant cruise ship. And I'm thinking the most famous cruise ship in the world, in history, I think, is the Titanic, right?
You're correct. And of course, I'm not really that surprised that you didn't get it this week because, of course, as you know, this has been a really highly requested episode from our listeners as well.
It's true. People really want to know about this story.
Even after all these years, people are still deeply interested in it. I was like really struggling with like what angle should we take? And the thing is though, when you think about the Titanic, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
It sinks.
Ooh, okay. I was
Spoiler
kind of hoping
alert.
for more, but yes, it
Okay.
does sink. But of course, like it's the grandeur of the ship, it's the luxury of first class, it's the events that kind of like led up to that fateful night when the Titanic obviously came head to head with the iceberg in the middle of the Atlantic. But the truth is, Adam, is that the Titanic wasn't just a marvel of engineering and an event that ended in tragedy. It was quite literally a window into what the world was like in 1912 Gilded Age. And this is all brought to life through the lives of the people that were on board this gigantic ship. And it's through their ambitions and their dreams for a better life that we get this insight into what the world was like. So, this is the first episode of a 2-part episode series.
Another 2-parter?
What was the last 2-parter that we
That was
did?
Amanda Knox. That was
That's
a while
it.
back.
But yes, this is a 2-parter episode on the Titanic. And the reason for that is just because it's such a massive story. And so in this first episode, we'll dive into the origins of the Titanic. We'll explore its ambitious conception, its construction, and the preparation for its maiden voyage. Then in the heart of this first episode, we will look at the passengers and the crew, and we'll bring to life the experiences of the elite millionaires, the second-class travelers, and the hopeful migrants in third class. And then, of course, we'll touch upon some of the crew that were on board as well and what life was like for them. And then in the second episode, which will be next week, we won't just gloss over the major events. We'll actually step onto the Titanic and set sail across the ocean, reliving the journey up to the moment that it collided with that iceberg. And then we will dive into the aftermath, examining the legacy and the tragedy that this story left behind. So I want you to prepare yourself for an epic journey as we navigate through the extraordinary tale of the Titanic.
Cool. This sounds exciting. You've really built this up.
Have I?
Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm so excited because it is just the people that make this story so incredible.
Well, it feels like, obviously, Titanic is an iconic movie. This could be the iconic podcast of Titanic story.
I mean, this is heavily, heavily, heavily based on the Titanic movie. So.
Oh, okay. But it's not 3 hours.
No, it's not 3 hours. It's going to be a long one, hence why we split it into 2 episodes. But yeah, I'm so excited because like the people are just so incredible. So Adam, The origins of the Titanic are fascinating, and they provide context to why some of the passengers decided to board to the New World. And to understand this, we need to look at three very key figures in this story. The first person is JP Morgan. Have you heard that name before?
Yeah, but I'm probably getting confused with the alcohol. No, maybe not this guy.
Maybe not. A guy called Bruce Ismay and William Perry.
Right.
Now, these names might not be as famous as the Titanic itself, but without them, the Titanic wouldn't even have existed in the first place.
Okay.
Now, JP Morgan, we'll start with him. So he embodied this ruthless empire-building capitalist kind of persona in the late 19th and early 20th century America. Now, Morgan made his fortune by investing in railroads and streetcars, becoming so rich that after the Panic of 1893, he could essentially bail out the USA.
Wow.
And his success in business stemmed from his ability to create these huge conglomerates and monopolies. And the most famous of this was US Steel, where he bought up all the competitors, including Andrew Carnegie. Do you remember that name?
Yeah, he was the guy that Cassie Chadwick was pretending to be part of his clan, his family.
That's right. Yeah, his illegitimate daughter.
That's it.
Yeah, so apparently for $240 million, that's all timely money, he bought out Andrew Carnegie's kind of steel kind of smelting business.
Wow.
So with his competitors out of the market, he could then fix prices to kind of suit his own agenda,
Sure.
if you will. So after creating a monopoly in steel, Morgan wanted to dominate the seas as well as the land. And this move was strategic for several reasons. Because at the time, the Gilded Age was obsessed with technology and modernity. Inventions like the steam engine, motor vehicles, electricity, refrigeration, and telephones were all beginning to change the world at this time. And across all these technologies, there was this constant race to be the best, the biggest, the fastest. Americans loved fast cars, fast communication, and of course, fast transatlantic travel on even bigger and bigger ships. And at the time, steamships were the ultimate symbol of modernity because they could bring people from Europe to the New World for a better life. And for the rich, it meant that they could extend their playground to the world, accessing European artworks, jewels, and culture. So Morgan started a conglomerate called the International Mercantile Marine. And this involved buying up different companies that specialized in transporting people across the Atlantic. And one of these was a British company called White Star. Recognize that name?
No.
That's the company that built the Titanic, Adam.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know that.
Oh my God, I'm shocked. Okay, well, at least you now know something. So by establishing this monopoly in transatlantic travel, Morgan could now, of course, set prices to suit himself, just like he did with steel. Now, JP Morgan's acquisition of White Star introduces us to the next person in our story. He is a guy called Bruce Ismay, and Bruce's father, Thomas Ismay, initially started the White Star Line. And when he died, of course, the business was handed down to Bruce. And unlike other liners that focused on speed, the White Star Line emphasized passenger comfort and luxury. Now, when Bruce Ismay inherited the company, he intended to carry on his father's legacy as a family-owned business. However, shortly after his father's death, Bruce surprised everyone by selling White Star to Morgan. Morgan was so set on acquiring White Star that he paid Bruce 10 times the market value, offering him $35 million plus a premium of $7 million. That's old timely money, Adam. That is huge.
Yeah, what is that now then? Because that's like over 100 years ago. So that must be, I don't know, that must be a lot.
A lot of money, man. So part of this hefty sale price included purchasing Bruce himself, because Bruce would continue to run White Star Line under the International Mercantile Marine kind of company, keeping the ships under a British flag as well as all British crews to preserve the brand's identity and standards that became so synonymous with White Star. So with JP Morgan almost set on establishing a monopoly on transatlantic travel, two snags began to emerge, making things very, very difficult for him. Now, for context, during the Boer War, Thomas Ismay had lent the British government several ships to aid in the war effort in South Africa. And these loan ships were pivotal in the British's success abroad, making the government really nervous about White Star no longer being kind of on hand to loan them any ships if they ever needed to.
Right.
So the British government looked to another shipping company called Cunard for this assurance, and they gave Cunard a huge cash injection in exchange for a promise that they would help the government if they ever required ships again. But this meant that JP Morgan was unsuccessful in acquiring Cunard. They were now a competitor that he couldn't just buy up because he needs to establish a monopoly in order to fix prices for himself, right?
Yes, of course.
Now, the second snag was the Germans. They decided to enter the shipping industry as well, but they emphasized speed alongside Ritz-Carlton standards of luxury.
So both, essentially.
Both.
Yeah.
That's the big problem. This was, of course, beyond anything that White Star had ever done. And additionally, the Germans were building many ships, lots of them. And this caused a big saturation in the market, essentially in the niche of luxury travel that Morgan wanted to dominate. This meant that competing was going to be hard. And also that he had no choice now because he'd already bought the company White Star. He couldn't go back on the deal, right?
Yeah. But they're known for like luxury, but not necessarily speed at this point.
That is correct, yeah. And they will never be known for speed. They're always going to be known for luxury and passenger comfort. So Morgan and Bruce Ismay teamed up with the first Viscount William James Perry, and he was the head of the Hartland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast. And together they hatched a plan to double down on the White Star's emphasis on luxury and passenger comfort. And together they planned to build the Olympic, the Britannic, and drawing in the headlines, the Titanic, which would be the world's most luxurious and largest ship at the time.
Yeah, that's why I remember that it was supposed to be like the biggest one ever to set sail up until that point.
I think it was like only like 3 inches bigger than the Olympic, so it wasn't that much bigger.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I was thinking it was like everything else paled in comparison.
Yeah, no, it wasn't that much bigger.
I guess it's like skyscrapers now. They're always like edging like, oh, what's going to be the next biggest sort of skyscraper? And when you look at it, it's only like some of them, they're only like 1 or 2 feet.
And sometimes they just put an aerial on top.
Yeah.
My aerial's bigger than yours. All right, Jim. It's very skinny though. So these 3 ships will be built in Belfast, which by 1912 was the biggest and richest industrial city in Ireland. And they produce things like cigarettes, cars, and even more linen than anywhere else on Earth. They were also renowned for, of course, their shipbuilding. So to ensure they met this brief of premium luxury, the designer Thomas Andrews and Bruce Ismay drew inspiration from the world's finest hotels and restaurants. And in order to do this, they took a trip on the maiden voyage of the Olympic. Their aim was to identify everything that the Titanic was not to be.
Okay.
For instance, they noticed that the kitchens didn't have potato peelers. So like, that needs to change. There weren't any cigarette holders in the toilet. So again, that had to change too. They thought that the reception rooms could do with having more tables and cane chairs. And they tested all the mattresses. They found them too springy. So they're like, that all needs to change too. And they also thought that the Olympic needed more cabins on the top deck. So the plan was for the Titanic to be fitted with multi-room class suites that included sitting rooms, servant quarters, and even private balconies, all within these luxury kind of suites on board the top deck.
I'm surprised that they didn't have potato peelers. And they were like, the Titanic needs potato peelers.
I guess they're just using a paring knife at the time. But yeah, that's one of the things they said.
That's just weird.
Potato peelers. The Titanic would also have all the latest technologies like electricity, refrigerators, and even a Marconi wireless station, which will allow you to send messages to land. And they even had a printing press on board in order to provide daily newspapers to passengers.
No way. So how are they getting their stories from like the signals that they were transferring?
Exactly. That Marconi device would always be like pinging messages, and then someone would scribe them down, and then they would send it to the printing press, and then someone in the printing press would then print newspapers for the next
clever.
day. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
In terms of the size, the Titanic would just be 3 inches larger than the Olympic. That would basically make this the biggest ship ever built by White Star, representing the highest attainments in naval architecture and marine engineering. And this accolade was important, especially if they were going to justify the price that they were going to charge for a single ticket, which was $870 per trip, equivalent to $400,000 in today's money. Of course, that was only for the first passengers, right?
Yeah, that is a lot. But
It's huge.
but I guess how long was the trip? Because I
Like
guess
5 days.
5 days and 400 grand.
Yeah.
Damn.
I know, right? So this ship needed to be luxurious, and it bloody was. So we are talking about a ship for billionaires, Adam, like the Elon Musks of the world and the
Right.
Jeff Bezos. However, while the Titanic was the biggest, most luxurious ship ever built by White Star, it was first and foremost intended to be an immigrant ship.
Yeah, because a lot of passengers were going to settle, because it was the maiden voyage was from Southampton, wasn't it, or Portsmouth, somewhere down there.
Yeah.
And it was going to New York. And so I knew a lot of people were going to go start a new life, hence the new world or whatever. That I knew a lot of people were on board that ship to do that.
While I knew they had like third class passengers, first and foremost, I thought it was a luxury liner. I didn't realize that ultimately that's how they were going to make a lot of their money, right?
Yeah, I think I knew that. But then, yeah, maybe it gets played down from all the luxury and obviously the tragedy.
I think some sources have said like it was first and foremost a immigrant ship. Others like, no, it was a luxury liner. But I think it needed to be in between, right? Because, of course, there's only a set number of millionaires in the world. And there's only a set number of times that they're going to want to get onto one of these ships. Whereas there are millions and millions of migrants coming across the Atlantic every year. So that's how they can guarantee that income. So I think there's a little bit from this column and a little bit of that column. And at this time, immigration to the New World was booming, with over 1 million people moving to the United States every year. And this mass migration was driven by various geopolitical issues that were plaguing Europe at the time. Many hopeful migrants were captivated by the American dream that was being propagated by companies like White Star, through kind of these enticing adverts and poems and paintings depicting the riches and the better life awaiting them in the United States. And the White Star Line emphasized how much easier this dream was to achieve thanks to the size and the comfort of their Olympic class sized kind of ships. And this even extended to what life was like traveling in steerage or third class. Like even that was going to be comfortable as well, which was mind-blowing and pioneering for the time, because no one ever cared about third-class passengers or steerage in any way. So this dream team set off building the Titanic, incorporating the best safety features that naval engineering could offer at the time. And the ship was to be fitted with a double bottom, meaning that it would have 2 sets of steel plates along its keel, which means that if it ever ran aground, there would be a second keel preventing the ship from taking on water. But this double bottom only applied to the keel of the ship, meaning that if damage was ever received to the sides, it would then take on water.
Right, okay.
But to counter this, the Titanic was fitted with 15 bulkheads. Now imagine these as vertical lines dividing the ship into 16 sections, all of which could act as their own watertight compartment. This means that if the ship ever ran into something like an iceberg,
what are the chances?
What are the chances? Then the bulkheads could easily kind of be shut. And basically, that means that it would prevent it from taking on water, because you can shut these airtight compartments on the sides, right?
I mean, that sounds great.
It does, as long as no more than 4 compartments are breached and are fully flooded. The ship would continue to stay afloat and would not sink.
Okay.
However, there was a flaw in this design. These bulkheads were very expensive, and in some sections, they were only built to rise up 10 feet above the waterline. Now, what does that mean? This means that if enough compartments were damaged, the ship would then start to take on water. It would then cause the ship to tip, allowing water to then spill over into the next compartment.
Right.
Which would then cause the ship to tip even more. And this would kickstart like a cascade of further tipping before the ship then capsized.
Right. So, but they didn't think that it would fill that, if it was to get damaged, they didn't think it would fill above these levels.
Because based on probability, the chances of more than 4 sections being damaged were unlikely. Because typically, when a ship hits an iceberg, it collides head on, right?
Yeah.
The bulkheads at the front are completely watertight. Completely. The designers believed that it was improbable that a ship would ever hit an iceberg from the side. So they thought that they could get away with shorter bulkheads. But in this case, the Titanic, as we know, it hit the iceberg from the side, as of course we'll discuss in the next episode. And that just made it very unlucky.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how they thought this is going to be really safe and everything. what are the chances? But this is what happens with engineering, right? You do something, then obviously the unthinkable happens.
Sure.
And then you have to
And
upgrade
these watertight bulkheads on the front of the ship literally made the Titanic able to just ram an iceberg. It was common practice. If you see an iceberg, don't change trajectory, just ram it.
Yeah, isn't that what they say? If it just didn't turn, then it probably would have been okay. We might cover this next episode.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So they considered all these different things. They just didn't consider that actually someone would try and turn the ship and they would smack the iceberg from the side.
I bet they felt so smug going, we built the best ship.
Well, yeah, I guess so. So as for lifeboats, that's the other thing that we know about the Titanic is that they just did not have enough lifeboats.
Yeah.
But the thing is, though, the Titanic was in complete compliance with the current maritime safety regulations, which was becoming increasingly outdated as ships got bigger and bigger, right?
Right.
So ships over like 10,000 tons needed to have 16 lifeboats, which were sufficient for 960 passengers. So the number of lifeboats were based on tonnage rather than how many people you got on board.
Right. Okay. That seems a bit
silly.
Yeah.
So the Titanic had 20 lifeboats in total, 14 standard wooden lifeboats with a capacity of 65 people, 2 emergency cutter kind of boats with a capacity of 40 people, and then 2 kind of Engelhart collapsible lifeboats with a capacity of around 47 people each. Now, the total lifeboat capacity on the Titanic was around 1,178.
And how many crew and passengers were on the Titanic?
So there were 2,224 passengers and crew on board when the Titanic sank.
So about half-ish.
Yeah.
So what I remember, people would always say, like, the Titanic was unsinkable. It didn't need that many lifeboats. But actually, the reason was the safety standard at that time was actually they were just meeting that minimum requirement.
Sure. William Perry and Thomas Andrews did consider including 48, possibly even 64 lifeboats.
Really?
Because they had an understanding that these regulations were outdated and there was looming conversations happening that could potentially change the regulations and then up the number of lifeboats. They didn't want to go through the ball ache of having to kind of change that once they started building the ship. So they considered upping the number of lifeboats. But it became very apparent that this wasn't going to actually happen. And also they preferred unobstructed views. So they decided to stick with 20 lifeboats, which was still 4 more than the regulations required. So to them, the Titanic was the forefront of health and safety at the time.
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
But they also thought that because the Atlantic was awash with other ships, these other ships could act as lifeboats in themselves. And as we know, this was tragically flawed because, yes, another ship did arrive on the scene. That was the Carpathia, but it was far too late. It was like 3 hours too late.
I was going to say, it's not like, I don't know, like the motorway where you've got all these like ships just like crossing each paths with each other.
But this is how they viewed things at the time.
Wow.
So on the 31st of March 1909, the Titanic was ready to lay down its keel. And after 2 years of building, J.P. Morgan, Bruce Ismay, and William Perry were all there to see it. And once it was in the water, thank God it didn't sink. And so that meant that it was time to start kitting out the interior, which took roughly around about a year to do.
Really? Well, that's quite a long time.
It was quite a long time, isn't it? So it was finally completed on April the 2nd, 1912, when they concluded 12 hours of sea trials. They practiced maneuvering, reversing, turning, and everything was just perfect, right? Everything worked brilliantly. So they decided that they were going to waste no time at all. They boarded all the crew and they set sail for Southampton to begin the Titanic's life, crossing back and forth across the Atlantic. Now, when in Southampton, they started loading the ship with all the supplies it would need. And it is a lot of shit.
Okay.
Here's just a few of the things that they included on board. 800 bundles of asparagus.
Okay.
16,000 lemons.
That's a lot of lemons.
There is a lot of lemons.
For 5 days? Okay. Is this just for one trip, this kind of the amount that they're stocking?
I'm assuming so, yeah.
Right, okay.
1,000 pounds of grapes.
Okay.
2,500 pounds of sausages. 1,500 bottles of wine, which I think is not that much.
Well, because I guess the wine's only going to be drunk by those that can probably afford it. And so if we're saying that maybe only 500 upper class people there, potentially, then maybe that's okay, 2 bottles?
For some reason...
They perhaps weren't heavy drinkers like we are now.
Maybe. On board were 12 mops,
Uh-huh. 12, that doesn't feel like enough.
It doesn't feel like enough.
Who did the quantities?
I don't know. There was 400 sugar tongs, 8,000 tumblers. They had 50 boxes of grapefruit,
Uh-huh.
40 tons of potatoes, that's huge.
But
I
how
guess.
many peelers?
Just one peeler that Bruce May insisted on.
Are you serious? They just had one peeler?
I have no idea how many peelers they had, but it's funny to me that probably just the one. He was like, do you know what? This ship doesn't have a potato peeler. Add that to the list. One potato peeler.
Check.
Yeah. And 6,000 pounds of bacon and ham.
Okay.
So just a few things on the list. And that's a lot of stuff, but also not what I expected. 12 mops and just like 1,500 bottles of wine.
Yeah, I guess what it sounds like, we know this from the lifeboats, their quantities of things, not quite right.
Exactly. Different world. Like I said, this episode is a window into what life was like back then. Clearly have got their priorities incorrect.
Yeah.
So basically, they just had a lot of people to feed and a very few puddles of vomit to clean up because they weren't going to have the alcohol on board, right?
Maybe, but then people get seasick. You're going to need more
That's true.
baskets.
So while all this was being loaded, the crew arrived for duty. In total, there were going to be 908 crew members divided into 3 departments: the deck, the engine, and the stewards. And amongst the deck crew were, of course, the main officers, a surgeon, a shopkeeper, window cleaners, and even lamp trimmers to go around and set the lamps for the evening. So it was really cool. And life for the crew while they were working was just brutal, Adam. For like a regular deck and steward crew, their days were typically 16 hours long. But as for the engine crew, like conditions were quite literally hell. Not only were they stuck below deck for most of their shift, working like in plus 40 degrees Celsius heat, they were dirty and they were sweltering. And at the end of their shift, they would be literally squelching in their boots, covered in sweat and soot, only to be back to work like in a few hours.
Yeah, I've watched Below Decks, and I get how it could be quite hard.
Adam, below deck Mediterranean is not the same as...
I'm in a 35 degree heat. That's hot. They have to get up at 6. Like, that chef's always cooking and stuff.
Yeah, that's true, but it's not quite the same.
No, they don't probably get a few grand tips either.
No, they don't. No, they don't. There's this really harrowing story about some of the crew members that highlights just how luck played a part in whether or not you lived or died on board the Titanic. So it was tradition that before starting on your grueling stint on board a ship was that you go on one last pub crawl. So 4 crew members, including a guy called John Podesta and William Nutbean, which I just love that name,
Nutbean,
went off to meet some of their mates at the pub called The Grapes. And at 10:50 a.m., just a couple hours before they were due to report for duty, they realized that they were late and they decided to start rushing back to the ship. Now, approaching the dock, they had come across a railway. And as they got there, a passenger train was kind of approaching. Now, John Podesta, he runs across the track, but the others had to wait for the train to pass. So John decided that he was just going to continue to the ship to avoid being late because they were cutting real fine at the moment. But because the train was much longer than expected, the others had to wait and wait and wait. And finally, when the train passed, they rushed across to the dock, but it was too late. The gangway was being closed. So they shouted over at the officer to let them through. But again, like I said, it was too late. They just refused, calling them unreliable and untrustworthy. And then they gestured over to some of the standby crew to take their place. And so those 4 guys missed their call. And 5 days later, all those standby crew would be dead.
Wow.
So if that train had just been delayed by just 1 minute or had been a little bit shorter, those men who lived and who died would have been completely different. And this just highlights just how much luck played a part in some instances. And we will come to the number of survivors later on. But what is sad is that out of the 908 crew, only 212 survive.
Damn, that's a lot that lost their lives.
Yeah.
And that's so fortunate these people just made a slight mistake which benefited them, which they had no idea about. I guess they were stressing so much. They lost their job, whatever it is.
That's
but
it.
actually, they were the luckiest people in the end. It's kind of like my granddad, actually, in a way.
Really?
In World War II. So he was put in prison, I remember, one night. And that meant he missed getting on board the U-boat or whatever it was that he needed to be on. And pretty much everyone on there, it was sunk. And everyone on there pretty much lost their life.
Wow.
So...
Wow. What are things you have to live with for your whole life?
Mm.
Because that's the key things that a lot of the survivors have to live with. Like, why them?
Yeah.
How lucky they were
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
got a spot on a lifeboat.
Yeah. As my granddad was very fortunate. There was another time, but I think he was on a boat and it was sinking, and just suddenly he found a life jacket, just one left.
Wow, just so lucky.
And he couldn't swim, so he picked that up and he got into the water, and I think someone else was there who helped him, sort of thing. But just one of those weird luck coincidences that. Yeah.
And then he made you.
Yeah, a few years later.
Yeah, it's just incredible. So again, like I said, it highlights just how much luck was involved in the fact that some of these people lived and died.
Yeah.
So this brings us to another set of very famous crew members, including the second officer, a guy called Charles Lightoller, who's, Adam, his life story is just incredible. So just real briefly, he came from a wealthy family of cotton processors. And at the age of 13, a little bit like your granddad, actually, at the age of 13, he began a 4-year sea apprentice where he was caught up in a terrifying cyclone, which ended up in him being shipwrecked. Then at the age of 21, he spent 3 years in West Africa, nearly dying of malaria. Then in 1898, he went on to the gold rushes in America, where he then became a cowboy. He then joined the White Star as a junior officer, making all the way up to second officer of the Titanic. Of course, the Titanic sank, and he survived that. And the list of things just go on and on and on. And the kind of close escapes,
Yeah.
like the near-death experiences that he experienced were just incredible.
I think some people just have different types of luck in life, and some people have this kind of weird luck. Like you've either screwed someone, I don't know, broke a lot of mirrors or something, or you've got some guardian angel looking over you.
That's it. And yeah, he goes on and lives an incredible life. He retires at 72 and he ends up dying at 78. So his story is just incredible, but he features majorly in the story, especially in the second episode. But then perhaps one of the most famous captains in the world is, of course, Captain Edward Smith, who throughout his entire career had clocked up over 2 million miles for White Star Line. And he was extremely competent. His salary at the time was £1,225 pounds a year, which is the equivalent of like $800,000 today. So it's huge. Plus, he would also get a bonus if he ever brought the ship back in good working order as well.
Which I'm hoping he did fairly often.
Well, typically, yeah. I mean, well, we'll get onto that.
Maybe not obviously the Titanic.
Yeah. What's good working order? Like, there's a little bit of dust here on this mantelpiece. Or is it like, there's a major hole in the hull?
I think just as long as it gets back. There you go. Get a bonus.
Oh, it's back.
Doing your job.
Natural wear and tear. And he looks just like his character in the James Cameron 1997 film. 100%. Great casting there. But the issue was that Captain Smith was a bit past his retirement. In fact, his age was starting to cause a few problems for him because in the 8 months prior to him sailing the Titanic, he was involved in 2 incidents. One where he had rammed his ship into a British cruiser, and another time where he had sailed over kind of a wrecked ship, resulting in him losing his propeller. So not good for his reputation. And this would eventually result in questions over whether or not he was even competent of mind to even be captaining the Titanic.
Right, so he was quite good, but he's had a couple of accidents. Which feels like riding over something maybe you didn't realise. Maybe I can understand that one, but like riding or driving straight into...
Probably reversing or manoeuvring. Yeah, he had another close hit as well when he was actually sailing the Titanic to Cherbourg, where he almost hit another cruise liner. But at the same time, it was heavily congested. So like he didn't actually hit them. So that actually shows that he's actually a great competent captain because he didn't hit it in a situation where everything was congested.
But then these other 2 times?
Exactly. So these are just the questions that people are asking. So now I'm going to introduce you to some of our passengers.
Is it Rose and Jack?
We'll see. So, on the morning of the 10th of April, 1912, it was the day of the Titanic's maiden voyage and time for the passengers to board. Most of the passengers started their journey from Waterloo Station, where there were several boat trains lined up to shuttle passengers to the Titanic in Southampton. That morning at Waterloo Station, there were literally hundreds of paparazzi waiting at the station to take photographs of the millionaires all arriving to start heading to the Titanic. There were 427 passengers in the first and second class and 495 passengers in the third class that would all be boarding these trains to shuttle to the Titanic. So when they arrived at Southampton, they had to begin the process of loading all the luggage onto the Titanic. 7,000 pieces of it. Most famous item loaded was a Renault Type CB Coupe de Ville car. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
A car.
A car. So
Right.
cast your mind back to the film Titanic
Yeah.
when Rose gets out of the car
Oh, yeah.
and her hat comes up,
Yeah.
sun hits her face,
Huh.
Titanic is seen in the distance,
Huh.
and you see all these people cranking up all the luggage and mounting that onto the ship. And one of those pieces was the car, and famously also the car.
Where they do that scene.
They do the sex scene. Yeah.
the steamy sex scene.
Mm-mm. That car was actually on board.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't realize that was her car.
No, it's not her car.
Oh, right.
It's just a car.
Okay.
I was just trying to paint a picture for you. The car was actually owned by a guy called William Ernest Carter. So he was a wealthy passenger from Pennsylvania. So all the passengers were on board. The Titanic was set to pick up the next lot of passengers in Cherbourg in France, where they actually picked up a lot more first-class passengers. And because Cherbourg didn't have a big enough docking station, most of the passengers had to be shuttled to the ship in smaller kind of little boats, along with all of their luggage, Adam. And this took hours. Most of the passengers picked up were Americans who had been traveling around Europe and kind of spending time in places like Paris and Venice. Finally, the Titanic eventually pulls out of Cherbourg at around 8 p.m. that evening and heads to Cove in Ireland to collect their last load of passengers. Now, the important thing to remember is that we don't actually know how many people boarded the Titanic because many passengers that were booked on didn't actually turn up. Amongst the millionaires, cancelling at the last minute was often seen as a sign of status to just not show up. So some of the millionaires that didn't show up was a guy called Milton Hershey, the great chocolate entrepreneur.
I was going to say, with the Hershey guy.
Yeah, terrible chocolate, probably should have been on board the ship that day to fully put an end to that brand of chocolate. Of course, I'm only joking.
Oh, yeah, I quite like the cookies and cream,
No,
but it's not chocolate.
It's not chocolate, Adam.
It's mocklet.
Yeah, you did it. You got a Friends reference in. Then there was a guy called Henry Clay Fick and his wife, who were American industrialists, and I think he was a financier and an art patron. They cancelled at the last minute because his wife had sprained her ankle, so they made a lucky escape as well. Also, George Vanderbilt, an American art collector and, of course, a member of the Vanderbilt family, he and his wife cancelled at the last minute because literally they had better things to do. And remember, tickets on board the Titanic were going for upwards of $400,000 for first class. So that's just wild to me that someone would just be like, oh, it's fine, I'll cancel.
Yeah, and the fact that they were happy to lose that money, or maybe I'm assuming they would have lost that money. They wouldn't have got like a refund.
Oh, God knows.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Crazy.
And of course, one of the most famous passengers that weren't on board that was supposed to be was JP Morgan himself. He was supposed to be traveling. And the reason why he wasn't is because there was this looming fear that a new tax was going to be introduced in France where he kept a lot of his artwork. So he decided to cancel at the last minute so he could oversee the movement of his art collection from Paris to America. There is a conspiracy theory, though, that JP Morgan, who of course famously bailed out the USA during the economic panic just a few years earlier, had arranged for John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidore Straus, who were, of course, all passengers on the Titanic and opposed to Morgan's bailout of the USA. And apparently he had arranged them all to be on board. And the conspiracy is that JP Morgan knew the Titanic was going to sink, thereby removing them from the equation.
Wow. That's a wild theory. That feels a little bit crazy, right?
But also stupid because, like, sure, maybe you knew the ship was going to sink, but you can't guarantee that they're not going to get onto a lifeboat. And also, they're first-class passengers. They're probably more likely to get onto a lifeboat.
Yeah.
You know?
And did he think that the thing was going to sink? Is that? That feels a bit.
Just a conspiracy theory. The thing is, though, in the aftermath of these types of tragedies, people look for blame. They look for reason. They look for reasons why these things happen. So this is where a lot of these conspiracy theories get born out of.
And the guy you mentioned, his name was Guggenheim?
Guggenheim.
That's a really good name.
Well, I'm going to come on to that because we have a little connection to Guggenheim.
We? As in
Me
us?
and you, yeah.
Guggenheim.
On one of our little trips away.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll explain in just a second when we get to some of the passengers.
Right.
So out of the passengers that did turn up, we have a very famous guy and one of the world's richest men, worth a whopping $2.6 billion in today's money. He is John Jacob Astor IV. Now, the Astor family was a very powerful dynasty during the kind of the Gilded Age in New York. And the Astors owned the Waldorf Astoria, which was like what the luxury on the Titanic was famously modeled after. That was the Waldorf Astoria hotels.
Right.
And his hotels invented the idea of providing tea rooms and bar lounges, very much like that gentleman's kind of club atmosphere. And the idea was that a luxury hotel was not just a place where you slept, but also where you could also hang out as well. And Astor was very keen on making sure that he distinguished himself from the average American millionaires. So he worked really, really hard to dress more English. So he would wear like an overcoat with a velvet collar. He had a bowler hat, complete with an umbrella and a very, very English, messy, bushy moustache. He kind of looked like the father from Mary Poppins. Almost exactly like that.
Sure. Okay.
Now, he was traveling with his new wife, Madeline Force, who people called his child bride because she was just 18 at the time and he was 47. And people did not like this. And after they got married, he wanted to introduce her to all of his friends in society, but hardly anyone turned up. And also, if they ever saw them out at the opera, people would literally just ignore them. So, millionaires are very, very cliquey people, Adam.
Yeah, I'd have thought so.
So before boarding the Titanic, they'd been traveling around Egypt and France. And at this point, Madeline was 4 months pregnant. So they were returning back to New York. And with them, they had a huge entourage, including the valet, her maid, his nurse, her nursemaid to obviously help with the pregnancy. And of course, they had their beloved dog, Kitty, with them as well. And Kitty was just one of 12 confirmed dogs on the ship as well. There was a King Charles Spaniel, a Fox Terrier, a Bulldog, a Pekingese dog called Sun Yat-sen, and a massive Great Dane as well. Also on board was the ship's cat called Jenny.
Oh.
Sadly, most of the dogs obviously died, including little Jenny as well. That makes you really sad. I can just imagine her.
Yeah, screw the people.
Yeah, save Jenny. Another millionaire on board was Ben Guggenheim, of course. As I mentioned, they have a famous, obviously, art gallery of the same name. In fact, their daughter Peggy has an art gallery in Venice, which we walk past near the entrance to the Grand Canal towards that big, massive opening.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember I have a picture of us, me taking a picture of the little kind of concrete plaque on the outside.
Yeah, I remember.
And yeah, so the Guggenheims, they were famous silver miners and extremely wealthy. They were also notorious strikebreakers, meaning that when their miners would go on strike, they would often just ship in some scabs, and they were just like so extremely unpopular amongst the lower classes. But they lived on Fifth Avenue and they had been traveling around Europe, just hanging around Venice and Paris. That was kind of their playground. So Ben also was traveling with his young 18-year-old French wife called Leontine. I can't pronounce that. It's a weird
that doesn't
French name.
Sound French, but we'll go with it.
It sounds like a female version of Leon.
Leon.
How would you womanize Leon?
Leona?
No, it's like Leontine.
Leontine?
I'm so terrible with accents.
Leontine.
Leontine, maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Basically, she was a French singer. This was very, very controversial. So they were very unpopular amongst the elites. So on board, they just kept themselves to themselves. They also had a huge entourage as well. They had maids, valets, a chauffeur who they booked into second class as well. So the next family that we have is the Widener family. So George and Eleanor, along with their son Harry and daughter-in-law, they'd been visiting Paris specifically to buy fabric for their daughter's wedding. Apparently, you can only get this fabric in France. So Harry, their son, he was a huge bibliophile, and apparently he was really hot. But I looked him up, and Adam, he looks like Eddie Munster.
Well, Eddie could have grown into a fine young man.
No, I couldn't see anything other than Eddie Munster with his slick back hair. He didn't have, obviously, his widow's bow.
I find it crazy that people are, just to show how wealthy I guess these people are, they are taking a trip to Paris just to buy some material.
Yeah, it's mental.
That is ridiculous.
It's crazy. So with him, he had a 1598 edition of Francis Bacon's essays with him, which he had bought for £260. To give you a sense of just how extremely wealthy they were, his mother's pearls were insured for £150,000. So £260 for a 1598 book was just chump change to them.
Yeah.
But that book, Adam, that's a Francis Bacon 1598 edition of his essays. That's now lost to the sea, and it makes you question what other artifacts are also lost. Like in the James Cameron film, we see Rose having her staff hang a Picasso, there's a Degas, there's a Monet. Obviously, those didn't sink because they still exist today. But these millionaires, they were obsessed with European artifacts. So it makes you question what else has been lost to the sea, because at the time, this was the only way that you could shuttle artworks across the ocean. So how many ships have sunk or how many things have been lost? Must be loads.
Well, hasn't there been so many people diving on the Titanic to recover whatever they can? That's where they found some of these artifacts, I'm assuming, which has inspired the movie and
Sure,
stories.
yeah, they've recovered a few things. In fact, James Cameron himself. So there were some gays on the Titanic.
What?
Yeah, so there was this couple who were both from the world of politics. They were Francis Millais and Archie Butt.
Archie Butt.
Archie Butt. So Francis Millais was a renowned artist, muralist, and a war correspondent in Russia. And he had served during the Civil War, and he had loads of war accolades. However, his lover was Archie Butt.
I can't talk. My surname.
So he was much younger than Francis, so he bagged himself a little daddy. And Archie was the military advisor to President Taft. And they were extremely close friends, which I love. So he was probably openly gay with the president, yet the president didn't shun him.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows you like there are some pockets of society that didn't completely disown someone for being gay or reject them, which is I quite like. I don't believe for a second that he didn't know that he was in a romantic relationship with another man.
And just to double check, because I don't know that president, I'm assuming the US president, you're saying that?
Yes, President Taft. So I've got a funny little anecdote about him. So Archie would often misplay golf shots for the president so that he would just like feel better about how bad he was at playing golf.
Oh no, you win again, Mr. President.
Yeah. And President Taft gets a real bad rap for being a really pathetic president. Really obese, kind of fat president who's always just seen as a bit of a buffoon.
Right, okay.
So they would stay up late at night. They would also play kind of bridge. He would laugh at all of Taft's really bad jokes. Archie was one of the very few people that would be able to tolerate the really horrible, vile meals that the fat president would serve, like broiled chicken, fish chowder, mustard pickles. But also, when people would be really mean to the president, calling him fatty, Archie would always be there to reassure him. Like,
you're just big boned.
Yeah, you just tell them that you're rubber and I'm glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you, or whatever it is. Did I mix that up?
Yeah.
Whatever. Sticks back to me. So apparently Francis and Archie's household was just filled with Filipino houseboys just wandering around.
Why would that be, Kyle?
Why do you think? Because they have a very messy house in a way that only Filipino boys can clean.
Okay, fine.
This is like their house is run with Filipino standards, Adam.
Okay.
But together they were extremely sociable, extremely infectious, and people really loved them. Just before their trip on the Titanic, Butt was in the middle of... Archie Butt was in the middle of a political fight between Taft and Roosevelt at the time, and it was causing him a lot of stress. So Francis suggested that they just travel to Europe for a bit of a holiday. There is a letter that Francis actually wrote to a friend on board the Titanic saying like, she has everything but taxicabs. She has restaurants a la carte, gymnasiums, Turkish baths, squash courts, palm gardens, smoking rooms for the ladies and the gents. They even have a riding machine in the gym.
A riding? As in like a
bucky horse thing?
No, and that's in the gym?
Yeah, but it's like more gentle. And it's just kind of really good for the thighs, apparently. They have dining saloons, lounges, cafes, quarters for first-class dogs. They even have the world's first swimming pool on board as well.
Really? Did it?
So it sounds like they were having a whale of a time. Sadly, when the Titanic sinks, they both drown. And President Taft is so devastated that he orders all flags on federal buildings to fly at half-mast, which just goes to show how close they were.
Yeah. Okay, that's sad. I can't believe the Titanic was the first to have a swimming pool.
Well, according to what I read.
Okay.
It could be a lie. I like how you said that. Oh, okay, according to what you read. Could be lies. So another high-profile passenger was Sir Cosmo Duff Gordon, a prominent English aristocrat and a sportsman who was a fencer for England at one point. But more impressive than him was his wife, Lady Duff Gordon, who started a world-renowned lingerie business owning a set of boutiques under the name of Madame Lucille. So Lucy began her fashion business after a messy divorce from her husband, which forced her to return to work. And her knickers and undergarments became so popular amongst royalty and high society that helped her kind of like break into the world of the millionaires. And soon after this, she had opened up a boutique in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which of course is owned by the Astor family. And so it was very much like whisper, whisper, ooh la la. Like she was like the Victoria's Secret of the day. Like hugely popular.
So like she would go up to women and be like, hey, I can get you some sexy garters.
And she opens up her coat.
Come with me.
And there's some like knickers.
Yeah.
Essentially, yes. So next we have D.W. Stead. So he was a British journalist and an editor who became one of the youngest newspaper editors in Britain at just the age of 22. Obviously, by the time he got into the Titanic, he was a lot older. But he famously published an expose called the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon, which basically exposed child prostitution in London and helped pass tougher laws. Now, while writing his pieces, he went out to prove how easy it was to access child prostitutes, which led him to get arrested.
But was he trying to prove a point or was he actually getting involved?
I think he was trying to prove a point how easy it was. It's like, I respect that because you are investigative journalists. You need to get into it, right? You need to get in the firing line. It's like a war correspondent. You get on the ground in the firing line to give people a sense of what it's like. And that's what he done. He went off to prove how easy it was to access child prostitutes. He got arrested, but at the end of the day, it shone a light in the right places, making him basically a huge hero to the British working class. But what's fascinating is that he was also a spiritualist. So one evening, his daughter Estelle, she was in her bedroom when a man walked in, took off his hat, sat down at a desk, and started writing poetry. So she goes over and she's like, what the are you doing in my bedroom? And he didn't say anything. He just completely ignored her, and then he vanished. So the same thing happened the next night. And the next night, and she mentions this to her father. He is convinced it was a ghost. So he gives her a device called a spirit indicator, which of course is used for communicating with ghosts. And Estelle uses it. And it turns out that the spirit was the spirit of a poet called Gordon Knight. And do you know what? They become lifelong friends. So when her father dies on the Titanic, Gordon would pass messages between Estelle and her dad, like letting her know that he was okay in the spirit world.
Interesting.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
A load of shit, though.
Yeah, I don't know if I buy it, but that's a nice story.
It's a wonderful story. So being on board as a first-class passenger was just brilliant. Another letter describes it as just exquisite. The rooms are larger than ordinary hotel rooms, much more luxurious. They've got wooden bedsteads, dressing tables, hot and cold water. They've got electric fans and electric heaters. And first-class passengers, they were even able to select their preferred bed on board as well. So you could select between Regency Anne's to King Louis Can beds. Like whatever you wanted, you could have it. And throughout the entire ship, the White Star logo is printed on literally everything from the crockery to the cutlery. Everything on board is state-of-the-art. So for example, for like meals, they would offer oysters, salmon, lamb, roast duck, and beef. And remember, Adam, that's significant because this is unlike anything anyone had seen before, because up until now, food like this would have just gone bad, right? But the ship had a new invention on board, and that was refrigeration. And this meant that it was possible to even serve things like strawberries in the middle of the Atlantic.
That's cool. I didn't realize another first for the Titanic.
Yeah, incredible. So, did you know that there were second-class passengers on the Titanic?
Doesn't really ring a bell. I think maybe it's the film that makes me think more of the first class and obviously those which are below decks and stuff like that.
Yeah. So a smaller group of passengers often overlooked in the retelling of the story are the second-class passengers. And these were people that were your typical clergymen, your teachers, your shop owners, clerks, and even the servants and chauffeurs to the first class. And it's interesting that you don't often hear much about these people, even though they formed one of the largest percentages of those who died. And I guess it's because, as a metaphor, the Titanic is more powerful when it is told through that lens of the haves and the have-nots, not the people in the middle. So the standards for second-class passengers were great. It is what you would expect from an Agatha Christie novel. Not super luxurious, but still better than what you would find in other second-class hotels in Europe. and in the United States, and certainly on any other ship at the time. Among the second class passengers were a group of Cornish miners who were off to kind of the Michigan copper belts to make their fortunes. Included was a confectioner named Henry Morley from Worcester, who was running off with his 19-year-old lover, Kate Phillips. But also a Lancashire carrot and potato salesman named Harry Formthorpe was also running off with his mistress, Lizzie Wilkins.
That feels quite niche.
It is very niche. You got to niche down, man, if you want to stand out in this world.
Yeah, I feel like, you could be just a grocer or whatever, but no, he just specialised in carrots.
But it's weird that there's quite a few passengers that were running off with their lovers.
Yeah, I guess to escape and, find a new life in New York.
Another passenger called Michael Navratil, he was on board because he had kidnapped his children from his wife in Nice following their divorce, and he was making a getaway to the USA, and he had left her a note saying, "You will never see the children again, but never fear about them. They will be in good hands." He actually survives the sinking of the Titanic, and he then later becomes a French philosopher professor, living right into his 70s.
Does his kids survive?
I don't know.
Yeah, because that feels like, you'll never see them again.
I imagine they did survive because a large portion of kids kind of did survive.
Yeah, good point.
There was also one black man traveling on the Titanic. His name was Joseph Laroche, and he was a brilliant engineer, and he had gone to Paris to study. And he ended up getting married to a French woman, and they end up having 2 daughters together. But the French were just extremely racist towards him and his family. And finally, he just had enough and decided to leave after getting a job offer as a math teacher from his uncle, who at the time was the president of Haiti. And because his wife was pregnant at the time, they wanted to get to Haiti before kind of she gave birth. And that's how they came to be second-class passengers on the Titanic. Another passenger from outside of Europe was a Japanese man named Matsubami Hosono.
You didn't completely butcher that one, I don't think.
Thank you. I tried. I'm not quite sure if I got it correct, though. But basically, he was a civil servant, and he was studying the Russian railway system in Russia. And he was booked on the Titanic because he was traveling back to Japan, across the Atlantic, over America, and then onto Japan from the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, kind of that way round.
Yeah, it was going over land.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to come back to them in the second episode after the Titanic finally hits the iceberg because their stories are really, really fascinating. But there was also a Mennonite missionary on board named, and I love this name, Clemma Funk. And she'd been on a mission teaching young girls in India, and she was traveling back home to see her ill father. So to get to the Titanic, she had traveled all the way to Bombay, then from Bombay to London to then board on to the Titanic. So she's had one hell of a journey as well. Another possible gay couple in second class was Lucy Temple and Amita Shelley. Now, they claimed that they were mother and daughter, but it was very clear that they were a couple, apparently.
Well, what were they doing?
So this is how another passenger describes them in one of their correspondence. An older woman from the Malua stables and racetracks traveling with a younger woman from the drabbest convict settlements should arouse mistrust. One imagines Lucy Temple with a rasping voice and skin like dirty leather, and Amita Shelley with a sharp pixie face and a lashing tongue.
Okay.
Just,
What?
they were just really unapproachable, I guess.
And that makes them lesbians?
I think it was just other signs
Okay.
that they were lesbians.
Fine. Interesting. I love how they describe this mistrust.
Mistrust should
Yeah.
arouse mistrust.
I might use that in everyday language now.
What for other gays?
What?
There's a couple men over there that should arouse mistrust.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so then, Adam, we now come to our third class passengers. Now, regarding the Titanic being an immigration ship, there was this belief that it was barricaded off to prevent kind of third class from bothering the first class passengers.
Yeah.
However, the real reason wasn't out of concern for first class passengers. It was because, remember, the Titanic was an immigration ship, so the US immigration demanded barriers to prevent contagious diseases from entering into the US. So when the Titanic was due to arrive in New York City, all immigrants were supposed to go through border control on Ellis Island to be inspected for lice and process all their paperwork and so on. So there was this widely held belief that steerage or third class was just this awful place infested with rats and they were fed gruel. But in the 1997 film, they do an incredible job of depicting what it was actually like. And in truth, Adam, it was probably the best time that many third class passengers had probably had in their entire life. Obviously, until everything went wrong.
Yeah, for a couple of days, they had a really nice time.
Yeah.
So is it kind of like for them, I don't know, staying at a Premier Inn?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, I guess if they're from working class background, maybe living in the city, this would be quite a treat for them. Running water.
Normally, ships would cram third class passengers in like sardines, but on the Titanic, they were under capacity anyway, but there was just a lot more privacy for passengers anyway. Like single women and families, they were separated from couples and single men in different kind of sections of the ship. All cabins had wash basins. They were well ventilated with fans that were made in Belfast. There were huge open communal showers and baths, completely the opposite of what other liners normally did, because they would normally keep these locked. So if you wanted access to them, it had to be at a particular time when they were open, or you had to go and ask for the key. Passengers also had full access to smoking rooms and bars, as well as wide open dining saloons as well. It really was a measure of the relative degree of luxury on board, especially in comparison to other ships of the day.
How much did it cost for someone, that was traveling across as an immigrant? Or
I don't know. Oh. I should have checked that.
Okay, fine. I guess it's affordable to some degree.
Yeah, it was affordable to a third class passenger.
Fine.
Almost all of the third class passengers were traveling to emigrate to the USA. And these people weren't just taking trips for holidays or for work. They were looking to make better lives for themselves. And out of the 712 third class passengers, interestingly, only 118 were British.
Oh, okay.
113 were Irish. But strangely, 191 of those people were Scandinavians, and they were split between the Swedes, the Finns, the Norwegians, and 7 Danes. And many parts of Scandinavia at the time were extremely poor at the turn of the 20th century. So these people were looking to migrate to Minnesota in the Midwest, where they were hoping to become farmers on the prairies. So again, they were looking for a better life. There were very few, like Eastern European Jews on board, because at the time, there was a lot of discrimination against Jews throughout Europe, and the White Star Line actively discouraged them from traveling because other passengers didn't want them on board. And White Star claimed that their untidiness and rudeness made them unpopular to have on board. They're horrible.
Right. So White Star was anti-Semitic then?
They were, but also remember they were trying to prioritize comfort of their passengers who didn't like the Jews. But yes, I mean, they're all contributing to this thing. That's not to say that there weren't Jewish passengers on board, because for the Jewish passengers that were on board, the White Star Line provided kosher food.
Oh, okay.
And speaking of food, by the way, like the food for third class passengers was by all accounts great. Like many had never had this much food when they were on the Titanic. Like they were getting 3 meals a day, Adam, and that wasn't the norm for many of the passengers that were on board. They were being served porridge, toast, marmalade, fish, boiled potatoes. And this might sound like drab food to us today, but the important thing is it was warm, it was filling, it was nutritious, right? And probably quite exotic to some. Like someone from Armenia, for example, they probably had never tried marmalade in their entire life.
Yeah, you take that for granted now, but back then that was like probably a lot of new experiences.
Absolutely. And they're getting consistent 3 meals a day, so they're probably loving it. So the bad reputation that third class had gotten over the years just wasn't true at all. It was spacious, it was open, it was not cramped, and the food was filling, nutritious, and even exotic in some cases. So out of the passengers that were on board in third class, there were 20 Croats on board. One notable passenger was a guy called Nikolai Lulik. He acted as a chaperone and interpreter for the others because many of them just couldn't speak English. So it was common for them to travel together with kind of like a more experienced person. So in Nikolai Lulik's case, he would often shuttle back and forth, chaperoning Croatians to the United States to help them start their new lives. So I think that's quite noble. I guess you can make a job out of that, considering how many people were coming to America every year. There were also around about 30 Armenians traveling from a region that we now know as Lebanon today. And at the time, the Ottoman Empire was making it very difficult for Armenians and other minorities in that area to kind of have like any meaningful kind of existence whatsoever. On top of this, a lot of Armenians, they were silk farming at the time, and the price of silk had just collapsed and there was just no demand for it. Also, various areas at the time were just being constantly invaded by Kurdish brigands, resulting in like loads of Armenians being slaughtered by the tens of thousands. And so those that could get out, they would get out and they would go to places like the USA. And the thing is, though, that what was happening in this area now would later become known as the Armenian genocide, where millions of Armenians were being slaughtered every year. And it was these people that could get out that were like making their way across to the United States. The important thing for me to point out here is that the common thread among many of these third class passengers was immigration from a different part of Eurasia. And some were going to stay in America permanently, while others were planning on returning just a few years later, remitting money back home. For instance, and that was a big thing as well, remitting money back home. So you go off, you work in the United States, you send a little bit of money to grandma.
Sure, yeah.
That was huge, and many countries relied on that. Croatia and Greece were increasingly becoming dependent on people sending money back home. So for many passengers in third class, the idea was that when they arrived in New York, they would enter into these migrant networks where a community of people would help them find a place to live. They would help them find work. They would help them navigate all the necessary paperwork to help them start their new lives. And I love this part of the Titanic story because it really does serve as a window into the various kind of aspects of international life at the early 20th century.
Yeah, I guess you don't realize maybe the size of the opportunity of emigrating at that time.
Yeah.
And why people needed to do that.
They had to do it. It was either that or you die in many cases.
Yeah.
And people, they want the best for their family. They want to give their children a better start in life. And that's the thing that was driving all of this. So it was massive, massive business at the time.
It must have seemed really exciting. Well, for some scary. They didn't want to leave maybe. But for some, I imagine just going to America, you've never heard, like you heard of it, but you haven't seen it on TV or anything like that. So you have no preconception, and then to get there and see something like that must have been like life-changing.
And then hopefully to get all this correspondence back as well from people that are already there saying like, I've got a farm and I've got my own crop and I've made some money and I've met a wife, and people want some of that for themselves, especially when they're in a situation where they just can't get ahead.
I wonder what the population was back then, because now it's 350, 60 million America or North America. So I wonder what it was back then for them needing all these immigrants and stuff, whereas now they probably don't need that.
Yeah, no, they certainly don't want them now, do they?
Yeah.
The way they keep going on.
So I wonder what it was like that back then and how busy it was.
Yeah, they quickly forgot what made them such a great country.
Yeah.
It was the immigration.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing that unifies all these passengers is that they were striving to find a better life, which I just think is just so sad. So before we end today's episode, I want to tell you about a very sad story that really got me when I read it. And it's about the Goldsmith family from Rochester. So Frank Goldsmith, his wife Emily, and their young son Frankie were moving to Detroit after their youngest son had died from diphtheria in 1911. With them, they were taking the younger brother of a friend of theirs who was already in the United States, and his name was Elfie Rush. And Elfie was just 15 at the time. And Elfie would celebrate his 16th birthday on Sunday, the 14th of April. That would be the last day of the Titanic's voyage.
Right, okay.
On the morning of the 14th, the Goldsmiths gave him a pair of long trousers that signified that he was now becoming a man. Alfred was so proud. He was just gleaming from ear to ear. When you see pictures of him, he's quite a small kid anyway. So this is a big thing for him to now be seen and be recognized as transitioning into a man when he didn't really look like one anyway, because he was quite small.
And why trousers? Like, was he only allowed to wear shorts up until this point?
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah. It was a thing. Like when you get given your first pair of trousers, it's a symbol that you've turned into a man. So of course, that evening when the Titanic was sinking, Alfred refused his spot on a lifeboat, saying that he was now a man and that he should stay with the men, effectively sealing his fate.
Wow. That's
horrifying.
A 16-year-old. You're still a child at that point.
You are.
I'm sure they would have been like, no, come on, you can get on this boat. Jeez.
They did.
And he said
and
no.
he refused because he was like 16. Like, I'm a man now. I'm going to stay behind. And that is the story of the origin of the Titanic, the world in which it was born into, some of the more notable passengers from first class, third class, and of course the often overlooked second class passengers.
Yeah, all these different stories. It's quite fascinating. They're all got, different stories to tell, their backgrounds, and how some survived, some didn't, some were there by sheer luck, accident. Some, how crazy.
It's crazy. And I just wish I could tell a lot more of these, but there just isn't time. But there are literally thousands and thousands of stories because this is the most captivating story of the last century, right? So, Adam, the Titanic is just about to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. And this is where I think we should leave it for today, because next week, when we return, I will outline the events that led up to that fateful evening on the 15th of April, 1912, where the Titanic sank beneath the waves. Of course, if you can't wait a whole 7 days for the next episode to drop, you can listen to it today by visiting us on Patreon and accessing this episode a whole week early. Also, we're going to leave listener mail until next week.
So you have to wait to see if you get read out then.
Yes. But yeah, should we run the outro?
Let's do it.
And so that's another episode of the Compendium podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow us on your favorite podcast app. It really helps us a lot. We now release episodes 7 days early on Patreon. It's completely free to access, so don't let the subscribe prompt fool you. If one episode isn't enough and you're craving our entire backlog of unreleased episodes, consider subscribing as a certified freak. You'll get access to all of our backlog episodes, exclusive posts, and what we're up to. Would love for you to join us and have a chat. We release new episodes every Tuesday, and until then, remember, even the grandest of dreams can sink without a trace. See you next time.
See ya.
If you love diving into the darkest corners of human nature, then Wicked and Grim, a true crime podcast, might just be your new obsession.
We're a husband and wife duo telling the chilling, the tragic, and the truly unbelievable true crime stories. Some you've heard, and many you haven't.
From infamous killers to eerie unsolved mysteries.
So if you're ready to get a little wicked
And a little grim, look for Wicked and Grim wherever you get your podcasts.
we'll be waiting.